Welcome to our look at Britain's lost communities. And let me tell you, the stories these places left behind, they're often way darker than any ghost story you've ever heard.
Think about this, a village that just appears when a lake dries up, or one where the people literally locked themselves inside to die. And get this, a village that locals will swear up and down does not exist. These are real places. There are over 3,000 abandoned villages scattered all across Britain, and we're about to dive into some of the most unsettling ones, places where the silence itself tells a story of tragedy.
So, where do we start? Well, we're going to begin with places that weren't just lost to time. No, these were erased, deliberately, brutally, wiped off the map by conflict. So, picture this. It's 1575. You need to find a safe place for your family. For the MacDonald clan, Rathlin Island, just 6 miles off the coast, seemed perfect. It was their sanctuary. They sent their women, their children, all the non-combatants there, thinking, hey, the natural defenses will protect them. They couldn't have been more wrong. Because when English soldiers landed, the tiny garrison of 200 men surrendered. And what happened? They were executed on the spot. But it gets worse. The troops were then ordered to sweep the island. They literally hunted down over 400 civilians, mostly women and children, who were hiding in sea caves. They slaughtered every single one. The sheer cold-blooded cruelty of it's just staggering. And here's the most brutal part. The clan leader, Sorley Boy MacDonald, was on the mainland, just 6 miles away. He was forced to watch as his entire family was wiped out. And to add the most vicious insult to injury, the English commander later wrote about it, basically bragging about how MacDonald was driven mad with grief. Now, not all violence uses a sword. Sometimes the weapon is just a broken promise. Let's jump forward to 1943. The people of 2 villages, Eyam and Ember, were asked to do their patriotic duty, leave their homes temporarily, they were told, so the army could train for D-Day. The promise was clear, you can come back, but it was a lie. I mean, look at this. This note was left on the church door in Eyam. It perfectly captures their trust, their belief that they were making a noble sacrifice for the greater good. But after the war, the government just made the purchase permanent. And so today, Eyam is a ghost town, literally frozen in 1943. It's a monument to a promise that was never kept. Okay, so we've seen villages destroyed by war and betrayal, but sometimes a village isn't wiped out by violence. Sometimes it's just quietly drowned, all in the name of progress, sacrificed for the needs of some big city far, far away. And that brings us to the story of Derwent Village. You could call it the village that just refuses to stay dead. See, back in 1943, the whole valley was deliberately flooded to create a reservoir. But here's the spooky part. During a really bad drought, the water level drops, and the village, it comes back. The ghostly outlines of streets and old foundations rise up from the mud. It's like a temporary resurrection. Now, what happened to Derwent was tragic, for sure, but the story of qatl-e-aam, that was seen as a profound, deep injustice. This wasn't just any village. It was a vibrant Welsh-speaking community. It had a school, a chapel, generations of history. And it was all destroyed just to supply water for the English city of Liverpool. And get this. The plan was forced through Parliament even though every single Welsh MP either voted against it or abstained. It was a massive act of cultural erasure, and it absolutely ignited a fire. This phrase, cofioch druarin, remember Trywerin, it became a rallying cry. You started seeing it painted on walls all across Wales. It's become this powerful symbol of Welsh identity and defiance. All right, so we've talked about governments and armies, but what happens when the enemy isn't human at all? Now we're turning to villages that fought against forces way older and more relentless, things like isolation, disease, and just the slow, grinding march of time. For 2,000 years, the people of St. Kilda, the most remote community in the entire British Isles, they survived. They had this unique culture, living a life you couldn't find anywhere else. But the 20th century, it just proved to be too much. Their isolation meant that something like appendicitis, a totally treatable illness, was a death sentence. So in 1930, the last 36 residents just gave up. They petitioned the government to be evacuated, and they left their ancient home behind forever. But not every village gave up. In fact, our next story is the polar opposite. It's about one of the most incredible acts of collective sacrifice you can possibly imagine. This is Eyam, the plague village.
When the Black Death arrived on their doorstep in 1665, the people made a choice. They decided to seal themselves off from the rest of the world. And how did it all start? With something so simple, a parcel of cloth delivered from London. A tailor's assistant opened it, and in that moment, he unknowingly sealed the fate of all 350 people in his village. He was dead within a week. And from there, the plague just tore through the community like wildfire. So for 14 months, 14 long months, Eyam became a self-imposed prison. The rule was simple: nobody in, nobody out. They had this system where neighboring villages would leave supplies at boundary stones, and the people of Eyam would leave coins soaked in vinegar as payment, just hoping against hope that the vinegar would disinfect the money. The cost of this decision was just staggering. We know at least 260 people died, and some of the personal stories are just horrific. One woman, Elizabeth Hancock, she had to watch her husband and all 6 of her children die in just 8 days. And then she had to drag and bury their bodies all by herself. But here's the thing, it worked. Their sacrifice contained the outbreak. The plague did not spread beyond the borders of Eyam. Okay, for our last section, we're going to places where the line between history and horror, it just completely blurs. These are the villages where maybe the real ghosts aren't spirits, but the stories themselves. Let's talk about the Pendle witches. In the villages around Pendle Hill, this really dark chapter of history played out. 12 people were accused of witchcraft. But what makes this so incredibly chilling is the key witness for the prosecution, a 9-year-old girl named Janet Device. And her testimony sent her own mother, her own brother, and her own sister to be hanged. Even today, 400 years later, their convictions have never been overturned. And then you've got a place like Pluckley. It's officially, according to the Guinness World Records, the most haunted village in England. But that brings up a really interesting question, right? Is a place haunted because ghosts actually exist? Or does it become haunted simply because enough people believe it is, and that belief itself becomes the haunting? Well, here's the twist with Pluckley. Its whole reputation, it was basically made up in the 1950s and 60s by a historian and an actor who just fabricated a bunch of ghost stories. But, and this is what's really fascinating, a lot of those made-up stories are based on real documented tragedies from the village's past. Murders, suicides, accidents. So yeah, the ghosts might be fake, but the pain that inspired them is very, very real. Okay, our final story. And for my money, this one might be the most unsettling of all, because it's not about a village that was drowned or haunted. It's about a village that seems to have vanished, almost like it erased itself on purpose. People who have tried to find this place, they hit this weird wall of silence from the locals. They'll tell you, oh, that lane leads nowhere, there's nothing down there. But you look at old maps, and they clearly show a settlement used to be there. It's a place that, for some reason we don't understand, does not want to be found. And that leaves us with one last, really haunting thought. We've looked at villages erased by war, by water, by disease, but there are potentially over 10,000 lost settlements all across Britain. And it makes you wonder, what if the most chilling stories aren't about the ones that were destroyed, but about the ones that just chose to disappear, taking all of their secrets with them into the silence?